Let's talk about what to do when you get stuck while working on your game. Because it happens to everybody. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it's going to. As soon as we're no longer just safely in the realm of tutorials, you're going to get stuck on something. And there's a bunch of reasons why that happens, right? I mean, it happens because you found an answer out there in the internet and didn't quite fit your project. Maybe you've even solved a problem like this before, but you overestimated how closely your past experience maps to your current tool or team or code base or project's needs. It's a very different thing than, what we're used to in school or in a workplace or even playing a video game, is that people sit problems in front of us that they know that we can solve, that are at our level, that we're going to be able to fix, and then it's just on us to fix them. But when you're driving your project because you're working alone or with a small team, and it's up to you what problems you take on, it's suddenly pretty easy to get in way over our heads, even in something that maybe looked kind of simple from the outset. When we estimated it, we were like, you know what? That's going to be my 1 week task. I'm going to knock it out. And we're going to keep on rolling forward. But what starts to happen, right? And so I got lots of people who are either in Gamketo Club, who we do our weekly check-ins, or just work with me one-on-one, where every single week I'm checking in with them on how's it been going, what are you doing next? And in these kind of situations, occasionally you start to see an echo, where for 2 weeks in a row, they kind of say basically the same thing for what they're going to do in the week ahead. So one of the reasons why outside accountability is helpful, because the time can kind of blur together if it's just doing a text file. But if you're communicating it outside of yourself as to what you're doing next, and you find yourself basically saying, I'm still working on integrating the characters, or I'm trying to get that animation working, or I'm still stuck on this design problem about how these pieces work, or whatever it is, that's your sign that you got to switch into risk mitigation mode. Now, risk mitigation is basically a big word for making sure you've got a plan to work around big risks, right? And at a giant studio, this is a full-time person's job, because if they don't get the risk mitigation right, project goes way over budget, way over schedule, because they're paying salaries and they're paying for office rent, and all these kind of burn rate factors pay into that, or contractors and etc. Even if you're just doing games on your own time with your own vision, for fun, for practice, for skill development, for socializing, whatever, as some people in the club do, for example, then you still want to keep your project moving forward. You still don't want to be stuck indefinitely, because you do have a separate kind of burn rate, and it's your morale. It's your feeling that that it matters when you throw energy into it. And if you just keep pounding time at it and having nothing to see from it, you're going to quit. You're going to quit that game. You're going to quit making games. I've seen it happen to people. That's why I want to steer you away from that by teaching you the basics of risk management or risk mitigation as just a little 3 questions we can take like 2 minutes to ask ourselves, okay? If you ever find yourself stuck on something longer than you expected, like I say, maybe it's 2 weeks in a row, you've been pouring time into something, have little to show for it, feel like you're starting to see an echo. 3 questions. First question, how important is it that we solve this problem in the way that we're currently trying to solve it? Right? If it's real important, then all right, maybe it deserves some more cycles. But oftentimes I've seen people get totally just off the cliff for things that really weren't worth it. We're not worth holding up the project for months at a time. We're not worth being stuck on. It's some background detail. It's some optional feature. It's some secondary thing. It's something where, frankly, a slightly different way of doing it would have been way easier and been just fine. Okay, so like the first question is, how important is it we solve this problem in this way? Now the second question is, what's our next best fallback solution that's a little more safe, a little more predictable, a little more known quantity, right? Maybe it takes us 4 weeks, but at least we can predict reliably it's going to take us 4 weeks and not an open-ended, we're not quite sure we're going to see progress on it kind of problem. Because again, in game development, it's an open-ended problem space. If at any point we could step into a deep black hole, not realizing the complication we're setting ourselves up for. And so we got to have figured out, what's my fallback plan that's going to simplify this? And sometimes this means, a different approach. Sometimes it means designing the problem out of existence. I mean, just as an easy to picture example, let's say what I'm stuck on is some sort of tricky pathfinding problem where my characters, I can't quite get them to go around the trees in a way that seems reasonable. Every It's not even a technology problem, right? It's a design aesthetics one of they keep looking kind of too just wrong about it. Maybe my fallback solution is I let the characters walk through the trees, right? I don't bother with the collision. I don't, and you know what? And frankly, maybe it kind of looks just fine because like, can a real person walk past the tree just fine? Often. And so depending on the kind of environment, I'm picturing like an RTS overhead thing where the trees and the characters are far away. Maybe that's fine, right? And it's maybe not worth getting hung up on indefinitely, being stuck on trying to solve this tricky, imperfect problem we could spend forever on, to just be like, you know what, maybe this is like the second best solution. It's not as good. It's not the first choice. It was still worth trying the other thing. But then that comes down to question 3. At what date, at what specific turning point do I accept that this main thing we were trying isn't working and I retreat to my fallback plan? You know, so okay, maybe I got until January 15th. If I can make the first thing I'm trying to do work by then, good, we got it, we're going to roll forward. If I don't by then, we don't got it, well, we're going to roll forward because we're going to switch to the safer, more predictable, more simple fallback plan that designs the problem out of existence, right? And again, it happens at every level of game developers. Experienced people do it to ourselves. Totally new people definitely have a hard time doing it, but it happens to everybody because making games always involves solving problems that either you've never solved before or that are very specific to the game you're working on, sometimes to the case that maybe no one has solved it before, or at least not in a way you have access to those people and their solutions, or their solutions just don't map to your tool, your technology, your situation, your time constraints, your resources, your experience level, whatever it is. Like I say, we have to constantly be careful about setting ourselves up in a way that we can keep going forward. And part of the way we protect ourselves is asking those questions about how important is it that we do it this way, what's our fallback plan, and when do we switch to it. Part of why a lot of us are terrible at this, why it's just a weak point for us, is because if you're coming out of an environment, like I say, school, work, whatever, not only are we usually handed problems that are kind of like custom ready for us, that someone else eyeballed as being suitable for us, but risk management happens, someone else is worrying about that. The project lead, the producer, the studio leads, the CEO, the whoever it is, right? If it turns out that we're stuck on cycling on a project and not making any progress on it, then someone else worries about spotting that and being like, oh, you know what? Here, let me fix some things around, do this now. And so it becomes this just spot that we're not, it's like in our, it's in our blind spot. And so we don't notice that we actually have the power in our personal projects to redesign the problem to fit our current constraints in our situation, right? That's another reason why this comes up. Not only are we used to someone else worrying about it for us so we don't get practice, but sometimes we don't actually have the choice to redesign our problem into something that's more appropriate for where we're currently at, or our time, or our constraints, or whatever. In our personal projects, we absolutely can. And it's the only way things stay on schedule to release at the point we aim for, which is so important to be able to look back on how you've been spending your time and feel good about seeing progress happening, changes happening, different kinds and variety of work, games getting released, games going out there, right? This is what gives you the power of certainty to be able to nail the release date, to have YouTube videos or websites or other things point to and target a date when you promise something's going to come out and it comes out. It's how for the Game Development Club, for Gamketo Club, right? It's how we've nailed every single game now, probably 20, 25, however many we've done in the past year. We say whether it's 1 month away, 5 months away, 6 months away, we say when it's coming out and it comes out. It's not because we're predicting the future. It's because we have risk mitigation every step of the way, checking to see, okay, well, if this doesn't quite work out on schedule, what's our next best plan? How and when do we decide to fall back to it? That's all there is to it. And here's the other reason why it's important to set that date in as to like, okay, how, like I say, by January 15th, right? Or within 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the maximum time I will let myself try chipping away at this problem that has potentially unknowable complexity or time for me. The reason why you have to do that ahead of time is if you wait until you're in the middle of it, it's really tempting 1 week at a time to keep kicking that can just a little bit into the future of like, well, I bet 1 more week will get it for me. And I bet 1 more week will get it for me. And then before you know it, you're looking back on the past 5 months and there's nothing new to show for it. There's no progress made. It held up literally everything else about your game, and very rarely is any piece of a game so important as to be worth that trade-off of having nothing to show for that time. So anyway, that's it for now. Chris Stellian here of Gamketo. I want to thank you for tuning in. As always, I look forward to playing your games in the future. Keep making games.